thank you all for coming. Welcome to the Mayor, Barry Coleman and Mary Coleman, Mary Edwards, granddaughter of the man on the wall, Tim, great-grandson. What are you, great-nephew?
Great-grandson?
Great-grandson. And welcome to the doctors who paid an extortionate amount of money for this plaque. Now, this is a picture of the first plaque that was put up in 1981 on the Zeppelin around the corner. That's 31 years ago. An article in the Eastern Evening News said, "This is the first of a series of such plaques on buildings in the town. We hope there'll be many more." So this is number 34. Barry Norman will think that he's actually been at the wall, but I can assure him that he hasn't. James Alfred Bevan, born in Australia 1858, his father emigrated there from Wales in 1948. His father was a successful stagecoach owner living in Melbourne. Both James Bevan's parents were drowned in 1866 on a voyage from London to Australia when their steamer, the London, was lost in the storm in the Bay of Biscay after wandering around for 3 days. In spite of manning the pumps, prayers to God, the steamer sank with a loss of 220 lives. This disaster eventually led to the formation of the Plimsoll Line, as the London had been heavily laden with iron as well as a lot of passengers. Eventually, James Bevan was brought back to Wales by his uncle. He was educated at Hereford Cathedral School and went to St. John's College Board and decided to host a match against Wales. Now, England had been playing international rugby matches for about 10 years, and Bevan was appointed the captain, even though he was an Australian, really. The game was a farce, and Wales were heavily defeated by 82 points to 0. We all know that next Saturday or Sunday Wales are going to win the Grand Slam, don't we? Now, the game was played at Blackheath, and the changing rooms were in the Princess of Wales public house, which didn't help matters, and it was alleged that the Welsh team was half cut when they took to the field because they required that courage. Now, Bevan never played for Wales again, having suffered such a defeat. Now, many Welsh people were outraged by this performance, so shortly after, the Welsh Rugby Union was formed. Now, Bevan read law at Cambridge and became a solicitor in Bristol. He fell in love with a man called, a woman, sorry. Woodall, a farmer's daughter. Now, the Woodall family were very religious, and Bevan himself was shocked to hear that his future wife prayed for his conversion. And James Bevan was told by his parents if he wanted to marry her, he had to give up smoking, drinking, and hunting. It sounds as though there were general practitioners before their time that don't smoke, don't drink, and don't hunt. This he did to the extent he became very involved in the church and attended the London College of Divinity. Now, apart from the Woodalls, the catalyst for Bevan's conversion was a meeting in Bristol held in 1886 by William Clark and Evangelical, who was also a well-known Christian athlete. Bevan left the meeting on the intense conviction of sin, and his brother-in-law stated, "Bevan's new faith found expressions in a new life, intense study of the Bible, and in buttonholing people anywhere at any time to tell them the joyful news of the gospel." At the time of his conversion, Bevan wrote to the matron of Oak Hospital, offering all the wine in his cellar for her disposal for medicinal purposes, if she collected them promptly. If she didn't, they all be smashed. You must remember alcohol was used this time as a stimulant. When I was a young houseman, I always used a bit of alcohol at night to stimulate people, but that all died, unfortunately. Terry would be upset to know that he threw all his pipes and cigars onto a fire. Now, he was ordained in 1888 and was at Hampstead as a curate for 4 years, and he spent most of his time in front of St. George's Church up the road there from 1899 to 1936. Now, he was an evangelical, a keen missionary. He was also a good golfer and played at Great Yarmouth golf course. But when Sunday golf commenced, he probably resigned and never played again. He was a firm believer that Sunday should be devoted to God. Now, in the Victorian era, there was a movement amongst Christians that promoted physical strength and health as well as Christian ideals in life, which became known as muscular Christianity. And its followers preached the spiritual value of sports, especially team sports. And Bevan fits neatly into this category of a muscular Christian and an evangelical. And St. George's Church boasted in the 1920s and 1936 football teams, and also a cricket team and other teams that played sports. During Bevan's tenure, the Bible classes, the Ladies' Working Party, the Women's Fellowship, the Young People's Fellowship and the Sunday Schools all flourished. Lenten slide lectures on biblical subjects attracted an audience of 200. There are sales and work, arts exhibitions, temperance meetings, band of hope meetings, lectures and concerts. His particular interest was a thing called the men's service, from where all these football teams derived from. At the end of the 1930s, it had 400 members. Now, Bevan oversaw several renovations of the church. A major restoration took place in 1932, took 2 years, and probably saved the church from ruin. Now, the restoration was difficult as the roof was riddled with death-watch beetle. And at this time, if you remember, well, you won't remember, but you probably remember it used to be covered with copper. It is now being replaced with lead, which was the institutional covering. Now, James Bevan and his family lived here, and this is a delightful photograph. And sitting just where Wendy is, that's it. The house was built in 1901 as the St. George's parsonage that encumbered the St. George's Church, and remained so until 1936. It cost £1,600 miles. Breakfast was held at 7:45, followed by prayers with the family in service. A hymn then proceeded a biblical passage, with each person present reading a verse in turn. Sundays were different. Bevan's wife, with her face covered by a veil, and the children, with the boys in evening suits, walked up the road to St. George's for Sunday morning service. Sunday lunch was a cold meal, as cooking involved working on the Sabbath. Afternoons were devoted to reading books and playing games. When Bevan retired in 1936, he decided to sell the parsonage. It was too large, and I'm sure the doctors will all concur with this. Its upkeep was too expensive. In 1936, the dentist, George Morrow Stewart, James Alfred Willis Stewart, purchased both number 2 and number 4. They practiced dentistry from number 2, and rented this side to Dr. Willis, Lee and Hopley in 1937. But the doctors purchased it in 1967. James Bevan died on the 3rd of February 1938 from prostate cancer. On the day the newspapers announced his death, Wales played Scotland at Murrayfield in Edinburgh. A minute's silence in tribute to James Bevan was not observed. It seems that Bevan's place in Welsh rugby history has been completely forgotten. There's some more pictures outside. Yeah. However, in 2007, a trophy was presented for the first time to the winners of the Australia versus Wales rugby union match. It was the 100th year of Test rugby between the two countries. The trophy was named the James Bevan Trophy. It was commissioned by International Business Wales. Gareth Davis, the Welsh international who some of you might remember, said, "James Bevan is a great example of a man that shared an affinity with both Australia and Wales, and as such, this trophy is a fitting reminder of both countries' rugby history." Bevan had 13 children, of whom 3 had died. In 1911, he and his wife lived here, with 10 children, a boarder, a parlour-maid, a housemaid and a cook. That's 16 in all. Of his 7 sons, 6 entered the church and 1 became a bishop in China. Bevan is buried at at Hampstead Cemetery. And the St. George's magazine commented in 1938, in the peaceful setting of Hampstead Cemetery, with its pure snowdrops lifting their blossoms to the quiet February sky, and the subdued notes of the birds forming a gentle unseen choir, he was laid to rest. Now, this man is quite important to Yarmouth, because he was here during many years, and there's a lot more about him in this book that's about to be published.
Hey.
But there'll be about 30 pages on our man Bevan in there. So it'll be about, you can't afford it. It'll be about £25. So here we have the first captain of rugby for Wales, a man who has an international trophy named after him, an evangelical, sporting, muscular churchman who devoted 37 years to the town, and who probably saved St. George's Church in the 1930s from demolition, as it's in such a poor state. Now, it's appropriate we should remember this man, especially in the year that St. George's has finally been tarted up and is going to be reopened in the summer. So he was a great man, and I think he's worthy of our remembrance of him. So Mary, who is his granddaughter, would you like to come and pull the string? Just pull it. Thank you. The next unveiling is on South Quay at 12:15.
There you go. It's exciting.
Actually, he'd be really quite excited.
As he's watching us now.
Was he sort of terribly Cumbrian? Did he say, look, you boy? Oh, nobody says that. You don't? You don't know.
But they were all full of life, full of personality, and went on to have the most wonderful lives themselves. And I had all these aunts and uncles, and I can honestly say that they were all lovely. Some were nicer than others.
I can't say that to my aunt.
And I've got all these cousins, some of them are dead now, but you know, they're lovely too. And you can't say, a lot of people can't say that about their families, can they?
You know,
and I'm very, very privileged
Oh, you are
to be
indeed,
part of this family, and Granny and Grandpa. Granny, nobody mentions Granny.
Well, this is... I cannot imagine.
She must have been for 20 years of her life. She must have been pregnant all the time.
But my grandmother was one of 11 children, and she said it was the eldest ones looked after the youngest ones.
Yes, yes. So it got easier as they got older.
Indeed, it did.
But then you got older when you were having your 8th child, or whatever you were.
For 21 years, you're either pregnant or just getting over having a baby.
Yes, indeed.
And she adored them all.
The servants would have helped a bit, though, wouldn't they? How many?
Yes, but you didn't have nice washing machines. You had
an awful lot more to do. Imagine.
They always had
Couldn't chuck the nappies away. You had to wash them all.
As well as all those children. It gives you a lot of cause for thought, really.
Indeed, it does. See you on the key.
All right, okay. See you.